Legacy League, it was all about the more points. Did you have that many people in any of those shootouts? And more importantly, moving forward, did you lose someone for a long period of time? Some of you did, so that's going to be some damage control. Who and where and what and when and all that fun stuff. Do a little bit of week 2 NFL, then we'll get right to our scores. It certainly isn't new to say the NFL and fantasy football is kind of set up under the idea of equilibrium and balance. But we saw a lot of it in week 1 and now week 2. If you won your week 1 matchup, or even if you were in the green, I know I made a huge stink about this, but you probably had a Jet, a Bill, or a Raven, because those are only really the 3 games where people went off. And if you had those teams going into week 2, you probably lost, meaning that you're 1-1, unless it was Cook and Lamar who did just fine. But even Allen in a winning effort for Buffalo, massively underwhelming performance. No, if you wanted to win week 2, it is very likely you had a Cowboy, a Giant, or a Lion who probably cost you week 1 and then definitely won you week 2. Most of the takeoff performances, especially the surprising ones, came from that game. Detroit especially, an onslaught. And if we're looking at the Campbell-Johnson rivalry here, and if you don't think it was a rivalry, Detroit was up by a few touchdowns and they still went for it on 4th down. That's a bit of a statement, so bear that in mind if and when they ever play each other again. Although, let's be honest, it's not going to be this year. I don't think both of those teams are going to make the playoffs, at least put it that way to be nice. The other kind of standing issue, aside from balance, is certainly the imbalance of the injuries. Now, again, I could not be knocking on wood hard enough, as in several leagues I have McCaffrey, but running back so far has not been the position where people go down. Yes, a couple wide receivers and certainly a noticeable tight end, but obviously quarterbacks is definitely the story. Now we've got Burrow, Purdy, JJ, Daniels, Fields, all either questionable or definitely out for week 2. Burrow for a longer time than that. And a little bit of a pet peeve of mine is sometimes when we give an injury a name, it's like hamstring strain. Technically, it's not really a strain. You've actually tore one of the 3 hamstring muscles, but it makes it sound a little softer. But no softer injury than turf toe that sounds like pinky nail replacement. But it's actually insanely painful. It is a full joint sprain, and it's really hard to plant anything on your foot, which is why if you're wondering why Burrow, they're saying, might be out for longer periods of time, it is not anything that is a mild ding. If you're looking at week 2 as well, just kind of reflecting on who's green and who's red, like I said, the best game of the week by far, surprisingly, was Dallas and the Giants. It certainly was not the Super Bowl rematch that people were hoping to be electric. I mean, for Kansas City, I barely mentioned them, and they're kind of not worth mentioning. I mean, sure, they're probably still going to make it, but 0-2 is pretty epic. Mahomes is fine, but I mean, one of his only receivers, and I whenever you're going to insult Travis Kelce, I get there's going to be a handful of Taylor Swift people. I am not saying it is connected to the fact that he got engaged, but since he's been engaged, he's coughed up at least one big play a game, essentially costing them both games. He dropped a pretty key one in week 1, and he didn't just drop, but kind of coughed it up to Philadelphia in week 2, which if you think one touchdown or one possession wasn't a huge deal, Philly if you haven't watched them, they're not kind of worth watching yet. They're like sitting with the new offensive coordinator in these massive jet engines and just taxiing around the airline. Hurts has not even thrown for a touchdown yet this year. And I know that's only 2 games, but go ahead and look at every other quarterback that has thrown for at least one. That's an offense that just hasn't gone off the ground, to carry on with my B-plus metaphor. Either way, heading into week 3, it's going to be tough to figure out exactly where we're going with or what's the plan. I do think if you've been watching a lot of the games, one of the other just kind of stories that you might be curious about, field goal kickers, why are they scoring so much more points? Well, the kickoff rules is a little bit messed up to essentially, if you are in Dallas, if you get a touchback and a first down, Aubrey actually has a shot. Dan Aubrey is to kicking what Happy Gilmore should have been to golf if it was real. He's just got this huge leg that suddenly has changed the game. Is that going to change our watching experience? Probably not. And do I have any idea what's coming up with week 3? Nah. Remember I said in an intro before, after 2 weeks last year, we thought the Saints were going to have a dynamite offense. So right now, courses can still change. We can't base too much on it. Now, we are probably looking at our rosters and trying to think, is this something that's going to be for the rest of the year, or are they going to snap out of it? Only time will tell, and clearly I have no clue. So let's just jump ahead and look at the scores from week 2. I'd love to tell you I hate talking about my own team, but most of you know that's not true. Now, I don't like talking about it on tape because then if it doesn't happen for me later on, you have evidence of me over smoking things. So I will go as quickly as I can. Pretty happy with the way things are panning out with some of my guys. Not super happy with some of the potential injury concerns, but I did have the wide receiver 2 in St. Brown, and I did have the running back 5 in CMC. But to be honest with you, between that and a quarterback 3 performance with May, I just did all right all around, and I didn't have too many stinkers other than Harvey. But we have enough players that I can make up for it with some people that just had solid and above average performances, which is what I'm looking for. My bench doesn't look too good, so let's not talk about that, but let's instead move on to a phenomenal bench. So sorry, dude, it wouldn't have won it for you, Rennie, but you did have the tight end 1 just sitting there when you had Laporta, so you got 2 strong tight ends. Wouldn't be shocked during bye weeks if you end up going a double tight end set if they both end up keeping there. Let's be honest, your biggest disappointment was not your decision. It's your boy Henry there that just had, that's going to be his bad week, knock on wood, without any kind of injuries. It is shocking in a game that went the way it went, but I guess they just didn't need him, and every once in a while you got to save him. So while it cost you a win on this one, since I kind of went off and you would have needed to go off as well, you couldn't look at the positive. Maybe this means that later on in the season, you'll have the legs that you're going to need to pump out a W when you need it. And hey, let's be honest, you're going to be one of the best at the 1-and-1s, still in the 3rd spot. Could be a lot worse, pal. Can't keep Gene down for too long. He's coming back in a big way. 152 is the 2nd best high score, but just over our number 3. You had some unlikely candidates, not always your big guy. Saquon did fine, but it was actually Jonathan Taylor that was the running back 1 on the week. You also had Jake the Snake Ferguson as tight end 3. On your bench, not a whole lot more. Bryce could have helped you out, but actually your quarterbacks were not the problem. He would have been your best quarterback option, but you did just fine. Rushkey, I am sorry, buddy. You had James Cook here. That obviously has been a great pickup and one of the few guys to go back-to-back on the top 5. He was the running back 2. Gotta love the fact that some of your Chicago boys are putting up some points. You got Nduze, though, on your bench, and he was the wide receiver 4. I'm cringing for a reason, doubling down on the quarterback injuries, which is going to suck narts. You had Burrow, who was in the game, and just knocking him out is not where you want to be. And then you got Fields going down as well after such a great week 1. So you're really down to your boy and whoever you decide to pick up on the waiver wire if you want to get a second quarterback. So things might be spiraling a bit, but if Chicago keeps at least getting you points, you can put your boys in, feel pretty good about it, and who knows, maybe that's enough to squeak out a win in week 3. They say you always remember your first, and in our league, Timmery, this is your first W. So congratulations, 151. A solid score is going to win you a whole lot of your weeks. How you did so? Now, if we look at kind of ringing the top 5, as I say a bunch, Lamar, obviously your boy, now back-to-back weeks, he gets in the top 5. He was the quarterback 4 in the week. And that's kind of it in terms of the ones that actually scored super high. Now, granted, in any other week, 24 points for a wide receiver might get you in the top 5. We just had a phenomenal wide receiver week this week. So nothing a whole lot on the go. You did have some steady performances on the bench, but you made most of the right calls here, so can't get too upset about that. It was going to be one of the two of you that was going to get your first win. Unfortunately, J squared, you didn't quite get there. You did have Neighbors as the wide receiver 1. Fantastic job. Bijan did not crack the top 5, but that's 2 weeks in a row. He's putting up solid performances. You just had too many downtrods here. Cincinnati was just bad juju, bad vibes for the whole thing, unless your name was Chase. Well, the other Chase. You know what I'm talking about. And Brock Bowers, not really performing so far where he needs to. Maybe some injury concerns on the mix there. You did have some people, though. Daniel Jones was the quarterback 5. Could have used him in the lineup and just gives you a little bit of hope moving forward. Maybe better than maybe his vaccinations are more up to date than your other quarterback. But aside from that, was close enough. 0-2, not the start you're looking for, but you do have a lot of weapons here, so best of luck in week 3. Timmy, you're on the board. Is this going to be the start of a run? Only time will tell. Only 2 teams are 2-0, and Jeff, you're the other one, so congratulations on that. How you did so? You had the good Chase. He was the wide receiver 3, and then just some solid performances. Haven't been drinking yet. And then ones that just weren't. So really your highs were very high. Obviously, you're not in love with this injury. You got tight end problems. You got flex options. no longer do you have Penix envy from the rest of the league, and no, that joke's not going anywhere, so just get used to it. You do have some bench options moving forward, but you're going to have to get crafty if you want to be 3-0 because the injury concerns are legitimate. Now, Tim, I'm going to be very careful in the way I say Tim and Timmy or Tim. OG Tim here. You kind of are dealing with some stuff as well. I mean, granted, you did have somebody crack the top 5, but they're on your bench. Now, he might end up being huge market value for what you paid for him, but you got to play him to get those points. Jennings is another guy. Don't blame you, though, because, I mean, obviously, time zone-wise, you're going to have to make that decision, and he was questionable, but turns out he did just fine. So let's see how that pans out for you for week 3. You are still looking for win number 1, but you're scratching at the surface. This was a closer matchup than it looks, and it was tight for most of the ride here. And if Jefferson does what he normally does, maybe you're not looking at that. Jeff, like I said, you got some damage control to maintain, but your big horses are playing well, so gotta love that. Most of the league is in that 1-1 spot, so we've got kind of the spectrum here of that, high score, low score. But Marco, you rang the bell here. You got on the board with your first win, and you did so through the backs of a few people here. Goff, obviously huge. He was the quarterback 2 technically in our league scoring. Russell outscored him, but quarterback 1 in terms of people that are rostered. Wilson didn't really get too many bites. And Achane is actually the running back 3 on the week. And that's a couple of healthy performances he put together in a row. So you got to be pretty pumped about that. In terms of the bench spots, made mostly good decisions, except to say that Rondell Robinson was the wide receiver 5. And you do have some points here to consider. So lots of promise and upswing. On the flip of that coin, Connor, with all your quarterbacks, they weren't quite enough to get going. Josh Allen obviously let you down. Daniels, not a huge issue, but a little bit of an underperformance and a little bit of a tweak here. Dax was your boy, though. He just was unfortunately on the bench. Everybody else was kind of in that middling. You just needed one guy to really truly go off. So while you got to be happy with some of the performances in terms of where they might be going, didn't really get you where you need to go. And if we're talking about Baltimore being the defense number 2, but our defense number 1, and if that's your shining star, I think you're going to need another position to step up. So not the worst in the world, and obviously you had such a strong week 1 that you're still in the top 4 overall, but you're going to look to bounce back next week. Marco, that's 1 win. Let's keep it going, see how far this momentum can push you. One last peek at week 2 before we jump ahead to week 3. I'm not going to get too excited about the matchups. I do love it when I play Rushkey. Always fun, especially since he changed his name. It makes me feel a little better about myself. I love the 2-3 matchup. I like some old traditional matchups of some strong teams in our league and the new guys getting in. Momentum already starting. I don't want to go too much into it. Will the 0-2s get their first win? Will any of the undefeateds carry on? Guess we're just going to have to wait and find out. Like I said, it's going to be damage control starting earlier with the quarterbacks in a super flex league that does create a little bit of tension here. So let's see how the waiver wire pops forward and how people are preparing to deal with some of the uncertain futures. Either way, if you got unscathed position-wise, consider yourself lucky. If you didn't, maybe we'll get some moves on the go. We don't tend to get a lot of trades in this league, but that doesn't mean we can't start now. Either way, folks, I wish you all the best for week 3.